Good afternoon, not that kind of Christian here. Tony Linford, beginning chapter 10 from my novella, The Sash My Father Wore. Chapter 10 is entitled Starting Therapy. Just to update you on kind of what I'm looking at media-wise at the moment, and I must be watching this pretty much decades or several years after other people did. I'm watching on Amazon the whole of The Handmaid's Tale. It is absolutely brilliant. But just remember the dystopian world it predicts. Of course, I know it's only fiction, but allow enough right-wingers into power, and now allow enough fundamentalist Christians to take charge, and that kind of world in which gay people are hanged, people are called gender traitors, and they are strung up from lampposts. Let enough of them take over, and it's really frightening what you will be looking at in the future. So, quick shout out obviously for The Handmaid's Tale, and now beginning chapter 10, Starting Therapy. Eventually the physical wounds began to heal. The hospital released me back into the care of my parents. I was not to return to school. Mum was never allowed back on the ward. She wrote to our local Conservative MP to take the matter up with the House of Commons. There were a few column inches about it in our local rag, buried deep within. Dad even had a letter published in the Daily Mail, but Mum never returned to visit me. She was not even permitted to be on hospital property. Dad got the horn-rimmed, born-again Mary Whitehouse involved in this, while our Pastor Frank called in a favour from a lobby group called Christian Concern. They still exist to this day and have grown over the decades. They support many so-called Christians who claim to have had their religious liberties violated. Dad purchased what in those days we called a banding machine. It was also known as a duplicator. He had his letter that had been published in the Mail typed onto the wax stencil. He and Pastor Frank stayed up late into the night in our living room, turning the handle on the duplicator, turning out hundreds of what in those days we called flyers. Some were mailed off to influential people. Everybody at Remnant Church was given a pile to hand out. Dad even tried to get the local Baptist church to give them out during their morning services. He was offended when the Baptist minister refused. He described him later as a liberal, progressive backslider. He did not approach the Catholic Church at the end of our road. Christian Concern expressed an interest, especially as he'd said to them that he believes Mum had the parental rights to see one of his own children were interfered with, and he argued that this prevented her carrying out her godly duty to care for his child, her duty to share the scriptures with me, especially in times after self-inflicted personal injury. He got a very polite reply on their headed notepaper, It was stated that they'd read his letter that was published in the Mail, and they knew how he was feeling at this injustice. They duly noted that he'd taken the matter up with his MP, but as no laws had been broken, or he was not charged with any criminal offence, and nor was Mum, they could not help him. They extended their prayerful support, but would not publish his letter in any of their current magazines or periodicals. Dad showed the letter to me as soon as I got home. Physically, I was still in a lot of pain. The doctors had managed to save some of my scrotal skin and had redirected my urethra. My testes could not be saved, and the spermatic cord had been cut. The surgeon also discovered I had damaged my prostate gland. I was leaking fluid from a very deep wound. Currently, I had a catheter in situ. It hurt when I urinated. Around my scrotum, the area was packed with surgical gauze. I could not walk due to intense pain. I had to be pushed around in a wheelchair on loan from the Red Cross. The district nurse would need to change my dressings every other day. Even in hospital, this made me scream in pain. As the nurse was female, I felt oddly embarrassed. She was a soft, kind person. She tried to be gentle as she could, but still I wriggled and winced like a girl. I was also booked in for a monthly follow-up appointment with my psychiatrist. I was meant to be getting my own community mental health nurse, and they were due to visit the week of my return home. In hospital, the psychiatrist asked me lots of questions about my mum and dad, my two brothers, what my earliest memories were, where did we live, how was I doing at school, was I bullied? The grey-haired man with the steel-rimmed glasses asked me how I felt about my father and what memories I had of him from my early childhood. I found it odd that he asked if I was physically punished as a child. He looked surprised when I told him, as Christian as Mum and Dad were, and they lived by the Bible, it was scriptural to punish a naughty child with a rod. I told him I'd been striped even as a small child, and I just accepted it as my parents cared for me enough to punish me. He adjusted his steel glasses and made a note in the folder. Closing the folder on the desk, he said calmly, "When you were striped, James, did your father or your mother do this?" "It was always my father with his leather belt," I replied. He opened his briefcase and put the folder inside, closing the leather clasp. "Do you recall if the blows left bruises?" I thought for a moment and said, half laughing, but still feeling some kind of residual angst, "I don't know, but I do know it hurt when I sat down afterwards. Mum and Dad told us it was wrong and vain to look at our sinful bodies, so I never looked even in my bedroom mirror." "Thank you, James," said the doctor, getting up and leaving the consulting room. That was the day before I was discharged from the hospital. And we'll leave that there and come back to it later. Once again, a plug if you haven't seen it. Honestly, watch Handmaid's Tale. I've not read the book, but please watch it. This is the kind of society that fundamentalist Christians want.